Erma fish, Bodine, and I don't remember too much because I was little when I was born, and I don't remember too much. I was born in Woodruff, Arizona, and I have fond memories of it. 17th of October, 1920. Ellen Hatch and Harold Reedhead Fish were my parents. I have to remember my father didn't ever have a father much because he died when he was just a boy. So he helped the family by working, so he had no education. So he was strict. His word was law, and you didn't argue. My mother was easy, could talk her in or out of things. Not my dad. He was very strict. He worked on roads, and then they rebuilt the dams every year. The dam went out in Woodruff every year, and he worked, that kind of stuff. And he worked for the Sanjeros in Mesa. I didn't know much about what he was doing. I was just a kid. I don't remember what he did. He was a hard worker always, but he became a truck driver and had his own truck later. My mother taught school when Arthur was little. She was still teaching. And then when they moved to Arizona, back down here, she never taught again. Well, Brigham Young sent them to settle. Grandpa Hatch and then Grandpa Webb was a school teacher, and they sent him. And so that's where my parents grew up. I think it's about a city block big, and you go past that, you're out. But they tore down the houses. One time Jerry wanted to see where I was born, so we made a trip up there. They had nothing there, no post office, no grocery stores, nothing. So it was smaller than it was when I was born, and the houses had already been torn down. So I don't know. I never remember living there at all. No one went to a hospital to have babies. They didn't have doctors there. They only had midwives. And all of us were born in a home. I remember going to Woodruff in the summers sometimes, and I remember that I liked currant bushes, and they had gooseberries. And I remember my uncle's house. I don't remember my grandparents. And of course, all of my people were from there. Well, at first there was Arthur. His name was Harold Arthur, but he was known by Arthur. Lloyd, Joseph Albert, who was named after both grandparents, Lawrence Wayne. And that was our family for many years before Carolyn Rain came. I was in high school when she was born. I was close to Lloyd. Lloyd was more disposition like me, easygoing, didn't get riled up so much. Arthur and I fought constantly. We were only a year and a half apart, and he was the first boy, and he knew everything and did everything. By the time it came to the younger boys, they were just nuisances, I don't know. Oh, Helen was smart. I was not. I did what she told me. But I remember playing up there. We had a grandstand in Snowflake, and I had a cousin that lived there, and he'd tell me that the gypsies came every year and they stole kids. And he had us frightened half to death. And about 50 years later, I saw him and was talking to him about it, and he said he didn't remember, but that's something he would have done to scare us. We moved to Mesa because that's where Joe was born. And I remember getting lost, and my memory seems that I went to that Longfellow school that's down there on Broadway, and I got lost and the police picked me up. And with all the talking I have learned to do since, they couldn't understand a word I said till I went to school. And I went to kindergarten in Mesa. And I know I had a neighbor that lived next door, and I was crossing his fence, and I got hung up by a barbed wire on my ear. I still have the scar. He was a stapler, but I don't remember anything about him. I don't remember playing with his children, or I don't remember. And I just went to school. I never did like it. I only liked recess and the first day. The rest of the time, I did not like school. We would go and circle around a maple, that's what it was. And so I made a miniature one so my kids could see what a maple was, because it was fun to us kids. We would wind in and out and to music, and we got to wear our pretty dresses, and it was a lot of fun to us. We didn't have a lot of things like the children do now. We did have, I don't even remember having the merry-go-rounds like they had ended up having them. So I don't remember too much that many years ago. I mean, that's a lot of years ago. I don't remember.
So that was a maypole, right?
Maypole, uh-huh. And all the little grades, the first, second, and third grades, and the fourth grade, they had those out on the field. And every one of them were dressed pretty, and it was a lot of fun. I don't want to tell much about it. I was happy because I didn't have any better sense. Just went to school, went to church. We were always active at church. And I just like all the kids did. We always had neighbors at our house because we had a big family, and my dad did not like us to go anybody else's house, so all the neighbors came to our house. And we would play games, and we had a lot of fun. We played Rover, Rover, Come Over. We hide and seek, and Mother, May I? And kids don't even know what they are. And the girls, we played jump rope and jacks, and the boys played marbles. And that's a thing of the past. They don't know how anymore. Well, we sat around the table. We always knelt for prayer. And we sat around the table according to our ages. Helen, Erma, Arthur, Lloyd, Joe, and Wayne. And it was fun. Our meals were fun. It was during the Depression. There wasn't a big choice of anything. I think my mother learned how to cook potatoes in 50 different ways. We had lots of beans and homemade bread. We never went hungry, though. Too many. Helen and I, my mother was sick. A lot. So Helen and I had to do things before we were really old enough to have to do them. So by the time I got married, I didn't care about doing all them again. Well, we helped with the washing. We ironed all day Saturday. And we did everything. We learned to cook. We learned to sew. We learned to do everything because there was no one else to do it. 2 older girls with 4 boys younger. And their idea of heaven was to keep us fussing about them. So like they'd come up and flip us while we're washing the dishes and then run. And I would chase them because I was kind of a tomboy. And I'd catch them. And Helen said, "You're not smart." Well, I knew that anyway. She said, "Just wait till they come in, then you can." Well, by then I'm not mad anymore, so it wasn't any fun to do it. They tried us every way they could. That was their fun. The first place that I really remember, of course, we lived so many different places, but when we lived in Mesa, we lived right across the street from the church. But we always were active, but I don't remember much about that. But when we moved to Phoenix, we went as a family. We never missed. We were the last ones to get there because my dad was afraid they'd call on him to pray, and he didn't want to do that. And then as soon as amen was said, we ran for the car, got home. But we were always in music. We had music nights forever. My aunt was a teacher of music, and that's where I learned. Started playing for primary when I was still in primary. And I've been playing ever since.
Yeah.
My father never had a lesson, but he played a lot of instruments. He played the saxophone and the violin, and our evenings were music, and we did it with my aunt and uncle, who were both musicians, and we kids used to sit outside and listen to the music. Didn't even go inside, but that was our evenings. We had music with our relatives, and we got together with our relatives all the time. After our grandparents moved to Mesa, we came over every week to Mesa, saw our grandparents, and uncles and aunts, with all our relatives. We knew them all. And I remember a lot of them as a child, the fun we had with them. Music was the only thing really that kept our family together. We entered a contest once at KOY. We both played a solo and then we played a duet together. And I won first place. And I got a silver dollar. Let's see, it must have had 3 silver dollars. I don't remember exactly. But I can remember turning them from hand to hand without money. And I didn't think I'd ever win anything, but I won first place. But I've always been active in it. And in school, I was active. I was in a chorus that we would go to different clubs and perform. And they'd have a small group go, maybe 6 of us. And I was always one that got to go. So I was known by my music. And I'm not spectacular in it, but that's what we did, was music. Well, all of the clothes I made were favorites. When I got in high school, my mother said, "You want any? You make them." And from then on, I made for them, and I made for my friends. And see, the thing of it is, depression wasn't entirely bad for a lot of things, because you could not buy anything. Zippers, thread, everything was hard to come by. So you learned. In fact, my first clothes that I had, I made over out of someone else's cast-offs. And I learned to alter. You learn things that you won't learn because you can go buy them. We couldn't go buy them, so we learned to do all of those things. And it stood well in my life because I still do it. I don't like doing it anymore because it's easier to buy it ready-made. Back then, like if you wanted to make a dress, like 25 cents a yard for material, Helen and I both babysat people for spending money. And so I made a lot of my mother's clothes. I made for friends. So I did dressmaking, and I had plenty of clothes. I made Carol's clothes, and then she had to buy the material enough for me one. So that's how I built up my wardrobe. And then I had too many, so I said, well, now I would need shoes, so we'll keep doing it, and I'll buy shoes. And that's what we did. I made all of Mary Ellen's clothes until she got old enough to get a job of her own, and then she preferred I make them. And even after she was married, I made some because I liked doing it. But I made all my children's clothes. I even made the boys wear short pants they didn't like. But I always have been busy with something. I never wanted to be idle. So I'm always making something, and I still am. I made Mary Ellen's wedding dress, I made the bridesmaids' dresses, and I made Noni's wedding dress. And I used to like it so, but I don't anymore. I get kind of sick at my stomach when I open the machine. The Men and Gleaners was for the older teenagers. And we used to do all the decorating for everything we did, and we had fun. We had parties, and like they used to have the Golden Green Ball, which they've discontinued. and Sadie Hawkins Day, where the girl had to ask the boy to go to the dance, and we would come over to Mesa, to the Mazona, for some of the dances. And so we met kids from Mesa. But the ones we really liked were from Tucson. And they would come for some of these things. But Mesa and Phoenix were always rivals. I met Warren at church. They had moved here from Utah. He had a sister that had a heart condition, and so they had to have her moved to a stronger climate. And he was the one that got the groups together, and we had the first, what they now call firesides. And they didn't have them then, they didn't call them that, but every Sunday, the teenagers would get together and we'd go to someone's house and we played Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John and some other games that I don't want to mention. It was fun. We had lots of fun. And he was the one that got it together all the time. But that ended. After he got married, he didn't want to do anything anymore. Well, we went ice skating, and of course he had ice skated. We went roller skating, and I said I could. Well, I couldn't. I fell all over the place. And he said, I thought you said you could skate. And I said, well, I thought about it. And then we went swimming, and I can't swim. And he was like a fish in water. He couldn't stay out of the water. But we still kept dating. Went to all of the functions that the church puts out for the youth. And they don't do all of them anymore. But we had lots of fun with a group. He never did ask me. He just says, we're getting married. So we set the date. And that went bad too. I don't want to even talk about that one. Well, because it was not everything went wrong.
Well, we want to hear about it.
I don't want to hear it.
Well, you know about it. We don't.
We don't know about it.
You got to say something.
Well, I didn't know any difference, so it didn't matter. My sister was on a mission when I got married. My people were poor. We had no money. So I didn't have a wedding dress. I was married in a skirt and blouse because then I could attend the temple regularly and have temple clothes. I did not want Warren to pick me up and take me to the temple. We go with my parents. So that's the last time I go as a single. And so I go, and Warren was late. But then we had our reception a week later because it was a Thanksgiving time. I didn't have a shower, and I was married in the bishop's home. And when the invitations came, they were all wrong, so they had to redo them. Then I go to the reception, and Warren had the people he was working with were invited. And I had the Noble Trio sing a song for me because I was close to them. And they came in dressed in a dress exactly like I had on, the only one I ever bought in my life, ready-made. They're all three of them dressed exactly like me. That's the way mine started out. So it's not something I look back on. I think it's funny now, but it did not think it was then. So there's a guy, he comes up and he says, now, I want to fix a breakfast for you. He was selling pots and pans. And we said, well, we don't have any dishes. We had nothing. And he says, well, that's all right. So he comes, and early in the morning, Warren had to be in Litchfield real early. And so he says, well, do you have baking powder? No. Do you have milk? No. And so he fixed a breakfast. He had to go to the store, find a place that was open, and bought the stuff and fixed the breakfast. Then he says, okay, now let's see about you buying these dishes. And he looked and he says, no, you can't do it. But he fixed a nice breakfast. After we got married, I was pregnant. And we moved to Douglas. After a few months, of course. And it was fun moving to a new place. But, we couldn't even afford to come back and forth to see the folks. So every 3 months I had to go home. I had to come see my parents. We had a good time, and they made me organist right off, ward organist, and they had a pump organ. You have to push it with your feet to make it go. Well, I was just playing the hymns just fine, and it quit playing. I forgot to pump. So I've had a lot of fun with my music, too. Warren was an accountant for the Wholesome Bakery in Douglas. And so he worked late nights, and we walked everywhere we went. It's a little tiny town. And we made friends there, a young couple about our age were close friends to us, and we learned to like Mexican food. That's where we started with it. Before that, in Phoenix, we would go to they only had one restaurant, and it was down on South Central, and we would go get Mexican food, only I ordered a hamburger. Warren ordered Mexican food. I wouldn't even try it. But in Douglas, I got hooked. But we had a lot of fun in the year that we were there. Well, see, war started while we were in Douglas. We drove up to a service station, had a blowout. And just as that tire blew out, they announced that we were at war. And so then things changed for everyone, because then the men were starting to be drafted. And so we moved back to Phoenix. And then Warren was not drafted because he had a problem with one of his hands, and so he did the counting. And all of our friends went in the service, but he didn't have to go because we had a child. At that time, if you had one, they didn't take you. They wouldn't draft you until later. They did them, but not to start with. We were glad to move back to Phoenix. To me, that was home. It was not to him. It was Utah was his home. And he'd say, let's move up to Zion. So we did. And he worked on the railroad. We prospered. We did fine. We've always moved a lot. We moved back to Phoenix because he could make more money here than he could in Utah. Utah was all white-collared workers, and that's what he was. And then here, it wasn't true. So he made more money here, and he set up his own business. He started a business with a friend of his, and it was called Copper State Supply. And we all, besides having carpet and tile mainly, ceramic tile, and it flourished, and he opened up one in Tucson also. And then somehow or other, he got in with someone from Utah, and they made dishes. I don't remember what happened to it. I think he got out of it and left the guy with it. I don't remember how he got out of it. But Copper State was his business, and it was a good business. We had 6 children: Mary Ellen, Jerry, Bob, Noni, Butch, and John. We did a lot of things with them, especially when we bought a boat. Butch didn't want to ski like the rest of the kids, so he'd get a tin can and fill it with water and get crawdads and bugs and cook. John would get on the skis in front of his dad, and he would say, "Fasto, Daddy, fasto." And for years, we went to the lake every week. I even learned to ski, and I'm scared to death of water. So the only reason I stayed up is because I knew if I was going to let go, I'd sink. But I liked driving the boat, but I did not like skiing. I remember as a child, when I'd start in school, they'd say, now you write a paper about your vacation. And we'd go home, we'd ask our parents, what is a vacation? We never had one. So my kids did have, but it was mainly at the lake when we had fun. Mary Ellen was very smart. She made top grades in school. She was in everything. They were playing football, and she joined the boys. And then they challenged her, really. They said, well, you beat us. now I want you to race with me. And they did, and she beat them. She beat the boys. Her dad did not go with her, and she remembers that. But she was very busy all the time. Jerry was a good student. He didn't have to work hard to get good grades. When he was 5 years old, he was hitting a rock with a hammer. And a piece, we didn't know it at the time, a piece of the hammer broke off and lodged in the back of his eye. We were told that he would lose his other eye. We didn't have it operated on. So he did, and he was unconscious for a long time, but he survived that. And he had good vision, but he ate carrots. Carrots. They're supposed to make your eyes strong. And he loved raw carrots. So he ate a lot of carrots. I didn't know that the children teased him about it, but they did. I learned later. But he was a good student, and he was a Boy Scout before he was old enough to be one. And of course, Bob got to go too because we furnished the transportation for the troop. And they went to Carlsbad Caverns, and they went to different places, and so Warren was always involved with the scoutings. And Jerry got his Eagle Badge when he was very young. Jerry went on a mission to Hawaii. We picked him up in Hawaii, toured it, and our impression was that in case of an emergency, we were a long ways from the United States. You couldn't go if war broke out again, there's no way you'd ever get out of there. And since the island was sunk originally and came up and formed this island, it could go down again too. We enjoyed our visit there. And then of course Jerry recently got to go back to that mission with his wife. And so they had their year together there, which was nice. Bob was a good kid. He had his problems. Every kid does, but you're not given a blueprint to tell what you do with each child. And you can look back on it years later and think, I should have done this or I shouldn't have done. But you can't redo it again. Bob always felt inferior, I think. Well, Warren was a health food nut at that time, and so the kids didn't have their sweets, so they sneaked them. Bob would get cocoa and sugar and put it under the bed. They gum wrappers, they still got their sweets. So I've told people that are on that same track, it's better to let them have some because they'll get it one way or another. Bob liked to cook, so one time he was fixing Mexican food, and we had it upstairs. The kitchen was upstairs, and he put his hand on that hot skillet, and with that grease, he dumped it and went all over everything. I was so mad because he was so stupid to grab a skillet with his bare hands that before I took him to the doctor, I took the kids to primary. And he's going to tell that at my funeral. But he was a good missionary, and he filled his mission. It was so cold where he went that the boys would start to say, I'm a Mormon missionary, and they couldn't even the words would freeze in their mouth. And then he decided that he was going to do a Mexican dinner for the group up there. So he phones home and asks us to send him some stuff to make it, because at that time you couldn't buy tortillas, you couldn't buy all the stuff. Utah's idea of Mexican food was different than ours. We had the original stuff, but he phoned home once and he says, send me some sauce real quick. That was so good I ate it, all the sauce for the dinner. So he put on dinners up there while he was on his mission. When he came home from his mission, we lived in a different state. Even we were living in Utah. So he didn't even come back to the friends that he had had. It was different for him. Noni was spoiled. By then she was a little girl. And my 4 boys slept in one room. We had bunk beds. Noni and Mary Ellen shared a bedroom, and then we had the other one. They never did fight. Noni always looked up to her sister as somebody special. When Mary Ellen got married, she was not married in the church. Her husband hadn't been a member long enough. So we wouldn't let Noni go to her wedding because she thought everything Mary Ellen did was perfect, and that's the way she would grow up, that I'm going to have one like my sister. So we let her go to the reception, but she didn't get to go to the wedding. Noni was like her grandmother. She had animals. Not one, she had several. She still does that. She is crazy about animals. Butch was my easy one. Butch liked to sleep, and he would fall asleep on the sofa. I'd pick him up and carry him to bed night after night. And he got too big, so I finally said, well, I can't carry you anymore. You've got to get up and go on your own. But I can't say I ever really had any problems with Butch. He was my easy one. Butch wanted to go with us to the grocery store, and I left him. And when we came home, we didn't have him. He was on his tricycle. He had bib overalls, one strap off, one on his little tricycle. And some woman had the audacity to stop him and call the police. We hunted. I went up and down. We lived close to the canal. And I could see where the tracks of the tricycle or bicycle had been, and we thought, oh my gosh, he's drowned. No, he hadn't. The police, I don't know how we finally found, we called, and the police said, oh, he's not lost. You're the ones that are lost. He was getting an ice cream cone. He was happy. But we shouldn't have left him. He wanted to go to the grocery store with us. He didn't get to go, so he did. So then the boys went on scout hikes all the time, scout trips, and they came back from Mexico, and one of them had a cigarette lighter, and he got in the closet in the boys' room and lit the clothes on fire. This was a conference Sunday. And Warren was already gone, and I phoned the church, and I said, I think you better come home, the house is on fire. And that's all I said to him. And I told Mary Ellen, I said, you take the kids and go out in the alley, put them in the car, and stay there. Don't let them in. That smoke was so bad that you'd pass out in it. And I had white furniture then. Oh, boy. Their bedroom was covered with cork wall, and Jerry made airplanes, everything. He had them on models. He had them all over the wall. And they burned off the wall. Our thermostat down the hall burned off. The house was so filled with smoke. And so I thought, well, before the fire engine got there, I thought, well, I'll get the hose and see if I can put it out. It was in their bedroom. So I go around, and I'm on the wrong side of the fence. And by the time I took the heel of my shoe and ripped the screen, put the water in, and I got the fire out before they got there. But everything in that room was ruined. And we had invited Warren's parents over for dinner. So I waited in soot and fixed dinner, and we had a good dinner anyway. But he learned, and he got really razzed because everybody knew he was a Mormon. And how come you had a cigarette lighter? He had a fire with a cigarette lighter. So he got a lot of kidding on that. Butch went to England on a mission, and we went over there to pick him up. And so we met a lot of the people that he had been proselyting. We toured a lot of the area that we had done before, but unfortunately for Butch, everything was closed down. Like the fountain, the Trevi Fountain, that's so famous, they have a movie made about it. I looked at him and I thought, oh my gosh, he's been sick. And he passed out when we got on the bus. He got up too fast. That was all that was wrong. He got up fast and he passed out. But I said, is that what your mission was like? And then he'd say, we'd hunt for a hotel, and they'd leave me parked with the baggage in wherever we were, and then they'd go find a place to stay. And then we get in this ratty place, and Butch says, ooh, this is posh. I said, how you been living? John was one of my most loving children. He loved for me to rock him. And I did, and I got very little sleep. I'd just put him down and I'd drop off, and there he was again. He was always very lively. He was fun. He's always been a fun child. Butch has always been serious, but John was more the other way. But I had all kinds with my 4 boys, and I loved every one of them. Of course, they got their spankings too. But I found out that I had to punish them while I was upset, because I can't stay upset. I can't stay mad. So when they do something, if I didn't punish them, they didn't get it unless their dad gave it to them. Well, after I thought I was through having children, I had Jimmy. Of course, I didn't get to keep him very long. He was only 3 days old when he passed on. And that was took me quite a while to get over that. But having babies, grandchildren, took some of the hurt away. And I was told that I would be able to raise him. And yet, it's kind of scary when you think about it. You're going to live forever and ever and ever and ever. What we do on the other side, we don't know. All we know is what we think we know. We don't know what's over there. And I'm not anxious to get there. Well, holidays were hectic. I don't remember too much about them anymore. I remember Christmases. Dad thought that I should have the biggest tree, that I wanted the biggest tree, because our other house was like this one, only the roof went like this, so we had a tree on this big part up here. And he called it bah humbug. Well, I always went to my parents for Christmas. My dad was lots of fun. I went Christmas every year, even after I was married. We went to my folks for Christmas. We always had Thanksgiving. We usually came to Mesa and had it with our grandparents, and then we had music, always music. Warren and his brother went to Africa. His younger brother was in business with him. And he saved money to make this trip, and he had all kinds of guns, and he also had a big gun for the big games. And I said, okay, you can go to Africa, but for every time you spend all that money, I want something in the house. So I got my first dishwasher, because he says, well, we have 6 dishwashers. So, and then there were several things that I said I'm going to have, and which I got before he went to Africa. And while he was gone, I took the kids and went to his brother's place up in California. We had lots of fun. They told us a shortcut. So we take a shortcut, and Mary Ellen is one that gets excited over everything. And she thought we were going to run out of gas. We were going to go over the side of the road. And by the time we got to Gus's, I was glad we got there. And then we camped in Yosemite. There was a bear chasing the little one, and he'd already gotten into people's food and things. And so he started heading towards us. Well, the kids and I ran for the cabin, and they shut the door in my face, and the bear's right behind me. And then Mary Ellen wanted to go swimming, so she did, and the water was so clear that you could see the bottom. And they would throw rocks and not let her get out, and the water was icy cold. But that's what the boys did to their sister. But we had lots of fun. I went to work when Warren came back from Africa. He sold his business. He lost the interest in it. Actually, he got cheated out of the sale of it. And so we didn't have very much money. We moved to Mesa because of our daughter. I decided I wanted to work. He says, well, you've always wanted to work. Go get you a job. So I went down to Sally's Fabrics because I knew fabrics. I had done dressmaking. She hired me overnight. She called me the next day after the interview. And I started right out selling as much as the rest of them did. And then I loved it so much, I did not want to give it up. So when Penny's opened up here in the mall, I had a friend that was working there, so I thought, well, I'd like to do that. So when I started working there, I found that they had an opening for a decorator. The decorators go to people's homes and do their drapes or whatever you need decorating in your home. And I loved it so much that I kept working. And Warren did not like me to work, but it was a fulfillment for me. But I regret that I worked as long as I did. It's better for the woman to stay home, raise the children. Even though they were gone, it's still better. So that's how our life has ended. I worked until he died, and then I quit. No, I worked after he died for a while. Warren and I had the kids pretty well gone, and we loved to travel. So Warren loved to travel. I remember when we went across the English Channel, and he said if I hadn't gotten married, what I would have done is sail the 7 seas. Well, we no sooner got out of sight of line till he got sick in his stomach. So he would never have done it if he had been single. He still would not have traveled that much. But we started in England, and we traveled most of Europe. And every place we went, they had no one that played the piano for church. And we looked up a church everywhere. So everywhere we went in Europe, except England, and they had an organist there. But the rest of them, they didn't. When we were in Hawaii, it was the same thing. They wanted me to stay and play and play and play because they didn't have anyone that did it. We did a lot of traveling. Now, he traveled, of course, when he went to Africa, he had been to Belgium and things in Egypt, and I didn't go to those places. I never went to Egypt. He would like to have been a year in each country and lived in each country for a year. I'm not sure that it would have worked out good, but of course he had business, he had to come back. But it was fun. We did a lot of traveling. And I remember when I saw the Blue Danube River that's so famous. It wasn't blue, it was brown. And things like that you've heard in history. But in Sherwood Forest, where Robin Hood was, we went to all of those places. And if I could have done that when I was in school, history would have meant something to me. Being only in the United States, you don't realize what the other part of the world is. I learned so much, and I thought if I'd known that when I was in school, I would have remembered more things because it was fun. I didn't get up to the Denmark and Sweden, but we also visited places that our ancestors came from. We did not take pictures of these. We went to some of them where they were buried, but we didn't take pictures. Well, after Warren died, I looked at him while he was laying there, and I thought, this part of your life is over. You have to make a new one. Fortunate for me, Butch and Delin moved in with me, and they lived there with me, and it kept me from mourning like a lot of people do when you lose your spouse. My sister-in-law did. They go into seclusion and they feel sorry for themselves for a couple of years. I didn't have time to do that. I was working, and I had Butch and Delin there, and then they had Kelly, and that was, you just take a baby, you forget all your problems when you got babies around. And it was hard for me when they moved out, but I knew they needed their own space. Everything was mine in the house, not theirs. And they hadn't been married that many years, and so it worked out good for me. It wasn't hard on them, but that's what we did. You have to accept what happens to you, whether you like it or not. But it's how you handle it. And so I did not feel sorry for myself, mourn. I had my bad moments, but you live through them. Well, I had a friend that was in the singles program, and she got me started going. And they used to have conferences in all different areas. I remember they had one in San Diego, and that's where I met a girl that I had gone to school with, high school. And she was in San Diego, and I met her and her husband there, and then she became single too. But it was really inspiring to go to those conferences, and we went to one, and the one that was up in the mountains. But it was fun. We played volleyball, and we had lessons, of course, classes, that were interesting. Had testimony meetings, were fantastic, but you come back just bubbling. You felt so good with those. But they put married people in charge of them, and they have no idea what the singles need. And they still don't. But they don't have anything for the older ones. They think that you need a small group, you need a big group. The ones you see every Sunday, it's not exciting. I met Claire in the singles program. He was in charge of his group. He furnished the transportation for about 4 of us women. We dated for a long time, and then we didn't single each other out. We just were in a group. And I was asked if I was going to marry him, and I said, heavens no. I didn't want to get married again. But then when he had his heart attack, it changed my ideas. He was the leader in it. He was a good dancer, which I liked. And we just kind of paired off. And then he didn't ask me to marry him. He just says, we're getting married. That's twice that happened. So we got married. Then the kids, when we left to go on our honeymoon, they put a big sign on the car, and they said, our mother just came from a fish to an elephant. His name was Oliphant, and he was teased because it's synonymous with elephant. I had a good marriage with him, so of course I missed my first husband, and I'm not sealed to Claire either. I will go with my husband. I was married to Claire for 15 years, and we went skiing, we traveled the United States. We didn't go overseas any, but we traveled almost every state. We had fun with his relatives and mine. I still keep in touch with some of his relatives. His children I do not have contact with anymore. We were busy. We were doing crafts, and he would cut the wood for our things we painted, and he kept busy. And that's what you have to do when you retire. If a man doesn't have something to do when he retires, they die younger. They have to be involved with something. Think about that too, because that's true. Yes, Butch, it is true.
I'm okay to die. It's okay.
Every Christmas, and I don't know how many years this has been going on, but it's been a long time. When I started in the crafts and I became fascinated with seeing every stroke I made in the paints would bring this article to life. And so I got really interested in it, and I made every kind of things. And for Christmas, I decided that for my grandchildren, I had 25. I could not afford to buy gifts for them, so I decided I would make an ornament. If I'm still here next year, I'm going to start in January making my ornaments for next year. And the older boys, Todd and Mary Ellen's boys, they have a tree that has nothing but ornaments I have made for them through the years, and it's full. It's been 30-something years that I've been doing that. I have been going to aerobics for probably off and on for 30 years. And 3 mornings a week I do aerobics, and I do them hard. There have been times that I've been dizzy or I did not feel good, and I just sit and watch them. But I open the church to get in to do them, so I have to be there. The doctor says the reason that I am still here is because of the aerobics, because it's kept me moving. When you sit all the time and you don't do anything, you get so you cannot use your legs or your arms. You just can't do it. So I have kept doing it, and I will. In fact, I asked the bishop if he was going to release me, and he says, when you fall over the keys, over the organ keys, he'll release me. My plans, I don't really have many. I'm just going to keep doing things with my grandkids. I'm anxious to see how they do in life. See, I got a lot of them now. I have 25 grandchildren. And out of that 25, I have 80 great-grandchildren. And from them, I've got 3, and part of another one, great-great-grandchildren. And I think I've done my share. I've multiplied. Now, we're here to multiply and replenish. That's what we were told. So I've multiplied. My greatest joy is to see how my children are raising their families in the church. When some of them don't make it, it hurts. Can you imagine we're all going to be together? Gee, it's a big place over there. And I don't think we'll be playing harps. You know, that's one thing I wished I'd learned to play, is the harp. Float around on a cloud and play a harp. Stay active in the church. Don't dwindle. You never know when you're going to be tempted. Some of my grandchildren have been. They have to keep active. Just like my sister said, when she could not hear what they were saying and she couldn't see very much, if you quit going to church because you don't, our brother's doing that. He hadn't been to church in I don't know when. You lose the spirit. And so you are helping Satan. So you stay active. No matter where you go or your circumstances, stay active in the church. You might not like everything they do, but you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. The best thing that people can do when they get old is keep active. Once you quit being active, you have no more joy in life. You really don't. You keep active. Do the things you like to do as long as you can. When you're no longer able to do those, then find some other way of keeping yourself in tune. I think that I have had a pretty good life. I've had my struggles like everybody, and it's how you handle them that you're accountable for. I think God knows what you're going to do before you do it, or what you don't do, He knows you're going to. We're supposed to be all forgiven for things, and that's what I'm praying for, is all this forgiveness. If you're responsible for your thoughts, I'm dead meat. What I have thought through the years has not always been good. So all you can do is live the best you can and pay your tithing. I know that's partly why I'm still here, because I was promised if you pay a full tithing that you will have certain blessings, and I've had them. I have always paid a full tithing my life. And I've heard a lot of people say when they retire, they don't have to pay it on Social Security. I've always paid on it. That is an increase to me, and that's the law is to pay his tithing. So I think it's very important. And stay active at church. Once you go on Sundays and do your fun things on Sundays, and keep families close. Families are what we're here for. Most important thing, families. And I've got good families. Well, I don't feel particularly sad about the fact that I might not be here another year, but it can happen. And I may be just ornery enough that I'll make it. Who knows? And I appreciate what my boys do for me. They're there if I need them. They don't always want to be, but they are. They're there. And so I am very family-oriented. I love all of my kids and my grandkids. I don't love everything they all do, but I love them. Because we all have faults, so you have to overlook them and pray for them. It's been very hard for me to publicly do a testimony, although I've done it twice, but I don't know what I said. People have told me, but I don't know what I said. Bob has heard me once, but none of the other kids have ever heard me. It's a silent one I have. I have a strong testimony, but it's one I can't voice. I'm surprised at this. Why on earth do you want to record my life? I'm not doing it. You know, we're told we're supposed to. If they wait for me to do it, there'll be a long wait. I've written in my journals many, many times, but there's not a thing in it that's interesting. Once in a while, I'll put down something that happens, like I went to a blessing of certain children, and I've enjoyed going to most of them. And I have a lot of friends that envy me because all my kids are here. They aren't scattered all over the world. And I see them at least every 6 weeks. And I've enjoyed being able to do that. Since I no longer cook anymore, you know, I don't even remember how. I made pancakes this morning. I can't believe it. I think it's the first time in 50 years I've made pancakes. I've eaten them in restaurants, but I haven't made them.
How was it?
Good. But I'm not going to make a habit of it. I am a chocoholic. I love it. I have a sign in my kitchen that says, I could give up chocolate, but I'm no quitter. And since some of my children are in the same boat, I think I gave Bob a sign. He's definitely a chocoholic. And when we go and we order a shake or something, they say, what flavor? And I said, there's only one, chocolate. I love chocolate. Where do I put it? I've got candy hidden all over the place. Chocolate. Name it. I've got them under the bed. I've got them in drawers. I have them in the pantry, mostly.